today we're going to be talking all things reshoring, which admittedly is not the sexiest topic, right? But from the conversations that I've been having throughout the day, I think it's something that's really practical and important. So yeah, to kind of go into it, right now, the UK's apparel and textile manufacturing industry is not seen as the biggest thing in the world, right? It wasn't always that way, but it's been on the decline for decades now, really. And COVID and Brexit have only made things even harder for UK brands trying to manufacture a little bit closer to home. Now, at best, the sector is seen as a little bit small, and at worst, we associate it with some of the exploitation that we see over in Leicester particularly. So in this session, we're going to be mapping out a way to reignite growth into the sector through partial reshoring as a strategy. We'll outline the current state of the apparel and manufacturing sector. We'll look at the job opportunities that reshoring will bring. We'll look at the potential benefits and limitations of manufacturing here in the UK. And we'll also look into how to change where you're manufacturing without harming your suppliers. So for those of you who haven't been to the Hat before, just to recap, in case you missed the first introduction, we'll be saying our bit, then you'll go away, chat in your groups for about 20 minutes, and we'll feed back. So really looking forward to hearing everyone's ideas on the topic. I'm Maliha Shoaib. I'm a reporter at Vogue Business covering diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and supply chain responsibility. And I'm very pleased to be joined by Phang, who is the co-founder and CMO of the Now Work, which is the platform that connects organizations with top sustainability talent. We have Simon Platts, who is CEO and co-founder of circularity platform Re-Up by Recomme, who also spent a decade as responsible sourcing director at ASOS. We have Rachel Walker, who is founder of Luxury Lock Stitch UK, a manufacturing facility that offers luxury finishing services, and Phull, who is managing director of Huntsman on Savile Row. So, Simon, I want to come to you first, actually. Can you paint me a picture of where we're at with the UK's textile and apparel manufacturing sector, both the good and the bad?
Okay, I'll bring it down again.
Very big picture.
Well, I live in Leicestershire, actually, so I do know what's going on around town. I think it's confused, is kind of where we're at as an industry from a UK point of view. We're losing skills. It's an ageing skill generation. The learning and development is being lost. We've just seen a cotton mill that was our last cotton mill that actually was the first cotton mill to be rebuilt a few years ago is gone. It's, you know, we're seeing things just fall away because it's all about price, but that's an intake price. And, you know, having been a sourcing director of a large retailer and then supplier and buyer and so on in the industry, you know, I've always understood the necessity for the balance. You got near, you got middle, and you got far. You know, there are certain products, there's no two ways about it, that you would want to get from places where you've got good relationships, economies of scale, and that would be certain far sources. But what near gives you is that ability to, you know, which is a killer for our industry, is to reduce your markdown, to reduce your inventory, to reduce your returns, to be more relevant to your consumers. Overconsumption is a different question that needs to be talked about, but certainly overproduction and valorising the benefits of that smarter and quicker and so on. My old boss, who's still the boss of Next, Simon, used to, when I was Jersey buyer, used to beat me up, not about markdown, but about missed sales. And he wanted to make sure I had Portugal at the time. I was doing Jersey, so we had India and so on. It was before Turkey, but I needed to be able to react. And we had the UK and places like Portugal. So it's really important that you understand what the UK can do, what it can't do, or what it shouldn't do, and that we then focus on enhancing and growing that opportunity. So using tech innovation and digital, you know, print on demands for fabrics, for products. You've got some amazing knitters and dyers that can get into speed. And again, your intake margin will be lower, but your net margin will be much closer to your intake margin. I know certain companies that are buying products from far away, taking the volume, taking the intake margin, but by the time it's returned, and it could be on a 60-70% return rate, because that's the kind of product it is, that their net margins are dropping into the minus. Well, surely it's about net and about profit. So it's part of your sourcing portfolio. And I think from a future point of view, it's about understanding what the UK textile fashion industry needs to set itself up for. We're probably not going to be building loads more cotton mills, but could we be building more manufacturers that can be reactive, that is using tech and innovation? Could we be investing in circularity and building recovery, recycle facilities to get new yarns and then knitting onshore, dyeing, and off we go. We get into that. So there's great optimism, but currently I think people are a bit confused, and because of the unlevel playing field within the industry, they're chasing the cheap needle around the planet rather than the smarter needle. It would be my...
Absolutely. Yeah, you've hit on something really important there in terms of chasing the lowest possible price, and how that's led to us looking at countries that are more economically vulnerable, that have, you know, more or fewer legislations and regulations around labour conditions. But I guess if we're to kind of reverse a little bit, Taj, can you kind of explain how Brexit has impacted manufacturers in the UK?
So in terms of how Brexit changed the way that, for our business, the way that we work, we're a global brand and we ship goods from Europe right the way back into the UK. So in terms of how Brexit changed the way that we operate as a business, the obvious is cost. I think that's the biggest thing for everyone, is the way that the cost and impact of importing goods, whether that could be £5 or over 500, and you have a percentage fee when items are brought back into the country. But then also the logistical, the time frames for products to get them in and around Europe mainly, is where the biggest issue is. For us, there's the uncertainty of customs and clear transparency in terms of how we can ship and transport goods. When that good is in its raw form, or whether that good is in its finished product, the taxes that you can incur going right the way through from when the good comes in and when the good comes out. Now, when we deal with a lot of mill manufacturers, I'm sure Rachel can relate, is when that product comes in, it will come in its flat form, and then we will export it out. Now, a lot of the mill manufacturers that are in the UK will have to centralise their distribution. So they will produce, for example, 200 metres of fabric in Huddersfield. They would have to transport that to Brussels, of which they will pay a tax levy to go out to Brussels. They would then have to distribute that back into the UK to us to produce the garment. It doesn't come directly from Huddersfield. So there's two forms of a percentage of VAT that goes out that's absorbed by us at the manufacturing level. But then also there's a carbon footprint on transporting that much goods to and fro. And that's kind of the biggest hindrance that we always feel that Brexit had on the business. But then also it's understanding not every business is equipped to have people employed to deal with HS codes, to deal with the paperwork that someone might need to deal with customs. So we had to hire a whole person within our business to deal with this logistically. That's kind of the biggest impact on the business, and where it comes back round full circle is essentially the cost. So if you're a small manufacturer or a startup and you're trying to operate on, let's say, £250,000 revenue a year, to add someone on, let's say, a very basic entry-level salary is really hindering your business to grow.
And Hannah, I want to come to you as well. So what sort of support do you think that we need here in the UK to actually boost the manufacturing sector? So I'm thinking education, training, government support, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a few things that you mentioned as well to build onto in the education and retraining side of things. And that's something that we're seeing a lot of as well, is actually the industry needs to be re-skilled to be future fit. And you touched on circular design. How do we, I mean, so much of today we talked about repair. That's a skill that people need to have, and that's something that this industry in particular has those foundational skills already. So it's just about looking at how can we evolve what the manufacturing industry can offer to be more future fit. And in order to make that happen, yes, we need support from government. I don't know if anyone else was just in the regulation panel earlier on today, but they were talking all about that. And they mentioned some of the bills and legislation that France had been bringing in as well, and the idea of right to repair. So I think looking at, from a legislation standpoint, how do we incentivize the companies and businesses here to have to address these types of things? And also, how do we make it harder and provide penalizations for not doing that as well? And then I think in addition to that, it's where are the UK brands? brands? How can the brands want to tell this story too? I'm sure you all saw Shen's video of the influencer and their super pristine manufacturer or supply chain thing. I mean, imagine if the UK brand said, actually, come look at our factory. It's literally just down the road, open doors. I think as brands integrate sustainability into their business models more and more, as consumers are demanding, and regulation as well, are demanding transparency, being able to say, yes, we do manufacture down the road is becoming increasingly compelling, but we need brands to support and demand that as well. And something else that the last panel mentioned too is that idea of this being pre-competitive, so something that brands can actually come together on and provide the support for UK manufacturers to help with the reskilling and bring the business back.
Mm-hmm. And Rachel, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I know that you're really passionate about both the legislation piece and also the education piece. So where do you see the opportunities for growth?
Well, just to echo basically what you guys have just said, because it all comes back down to, I think, for me, there's growth in what we've done really well for hundreds of years. So we've got amazing woolen mills, for example, throughout the UK, probably more than most people know. They're scattered all over the country. We've got great knitwear mills. And the problem that it comes to is the skill to keep that going. And that's where education comes in, and it's a whole multi-layered conversation. I think there's got to be something from brands to get involved with that as well, because it is about investing. Everyone says investing in people, don't they? Like, you hear it all the time. But without people, we have nothing to grow because we can't make anything. If we don't have those skills, and I think that's when we come back down to cost as well, because, of course, real living wage, we should, as a business for LLUK, we commit to the real living wage for London as well, even though we're just outside of London, because, let's face it, it's bloody expensive to live in general. So where does that put us? I think luxury brands, because if you look at what's mirrored in everyone's, the bit that sits behind the brands the values that they put out directly to consumers. So if you look at what investors are looking for, because they also have obligations to fulfill as well. So when that comes to investing in people, back to that's education, that means more jobs for people, back into spending in the country. What better box ticking is there to do than actually, and I hate box ticking, but as in, if you really want to tick a massive box, you're investing in communities, cities, towns, villages, and ultimately the whole country.
Mm-hmm. I know that you guys have been working on some talent programs as well, right, to kind of boost the opportunities, particularly for young people, and making, something like manufacturing sector an aspirational job for young people. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
I think it needs a massive PR job doing on it, to be honest.
Yeah.
To work in the textiles bit. Look, fashion is super glam on the outside, isn't it? It looks great. Designing, all those great jobs. But where I feel really passionate about is all of the jobs that support the fashion industry. We do sewing, essentially. Skills-based, human touch, hand sewing, machine sewing, embroidery, all of the hand skills that are really depleted now. So things like darning, which, you come back to repairing and mending and things like that as well. Those skills just don't, they don't exist. So to be able to teach that and show people that it's a viable career as well, you've got a career path. You don't just have to come in, sit on a machine all day long, or just sit and hand sew. You can learn about what the customers want. Tasha, we were just even talking about just that, the appetite outside of just what a standard business is. We've now got customer experience gifting. Look at how much brands are investing in their top 1% of clients, where they can't just give bulk product or what they're making in factories. They need to go above and beyond, and that comes with creativity from the manufacturer as well. So being able to say, well, actually, let's have some input from the manufacturer's side to give creativity to the people working there too, that just makes things a whole lot more exciting, rather than just you come in, you weave, you dye, you're in a dye house, you're sewing, there's more to it.
Yeah. Thaja, I'd love to hear about what you guys are doing at Huntsman as well. I know you've been working on quite a few talent initiatives as well.
A few is probably an understatement. So we work with London College of Fashion, We work with Fashion Trust Arabia. We work with Harriet Watt University in Glasgow. So I think for us, it's understanding what kind of talent pool there is in the world, as well as probably getting at least 3 to 4 applications a week, whether that be for an undercutter within the front of the store to train, to become a cutter within the business and flourish and be incredible within their trade. But it also includes, like Rachel said, the hand craftsmanship that goes into producing the garments. It's 80 hours of handwork that goes into just a jacket alone, producing a suit at Huntsman. So that skill set that you need to nurture to create the next generation. We're 175 years old this year. We didn't get there from just putting stuff in a toaster and it popping out. It's a whole process. So you have to invest into that time, into the person. But like Rachel said, you have to have the people to do it. We're lucky we have those people in an abundance. It's just being able to have enough finances to fund them, to train them, and to continue and have that in line with growth of the business. Now, when we deal with the universities, I think we're fortunate enough that we have such a good talent pool at the London College of Fashion and accessibility. When we deal with Harriet Watt University, a lot of the initiatives were on creativity. So very niche courses that they have, like in-house weaving, hand weaving. We work that talent pool in a competition process. So the 20 students that we had there created a tweed that was thought through from what they had from their brief, and then the winner had that produced, and it's in our store, so there's an element that goes back to them. With Fashion Trust Arabia, that was a little bit more broader to try and understand the other skill set that we have, because within the UK we don't focus a huge amount on hand embroidery and pieces like that. I know you do, Rachel, but the bigger set is having a talent pool from the MENA region offers a different form of skill set through the cultural level, and working with them to introduce that talent pool to the UK through internships and creating a capsule collection with a talented designer from the MENA region. All of these skill sets come together and create diversity within the workplace and really show the talent pool that we have in the UK, what else other people are doing in the world. And I think it's really key that the government really start to step in and allow businesses like us to push that and fund that further.
Mm-hmm. And Simon, to kind of move the conversation back to what reshoring looks like in practice, I know we've been talking a little bit about cost versus value when it comes to thinking about your manufacturing. Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the misconceptions that you think people have about the additional cost of manufacturing locally and how actually they could be getting more value or more, increasing their profitability from doing so?
Yeah, I guess, it goes back to that perception of what it looks like, what the UK landscape looks like, that, if there's manufacturing in the UK, I know certain brands that just won't touch it because they just believe that every factory that exists, not just in Leicester, but around the UK is going to be filled with people that aren't paying taxes, or are being exploited, or possibly illegally in the UK. I mean, this has just bubbled up. And actually, I've seen some incredible factories in the UK, and I've seen some incredible factories around the world in my career. And I've seen some shockers as well. It's not, a specific regional issue, a Turkish issue, or a North Africa or a Leicester issue. We need a bit of, rebranding about what it looks like, what it can look like. And then it takes brands to really understand what is it they're trying to produce. Is it a higher end product and therefore there's an opportunity there? Or is it something where actually I need to stay in the game to be very reactive? I don't need to be marking stuff down. I appreciate there's a different price for that, but I'm not going to have to pay a massive inventory. I'm not going to have to build another warehouse on the side of the M1 to store everything that I've bought. And then you realise the value of what you've got. It's not to replace everything that, I think the genie's out the bottle in terms of global sourcing. We're not going to pull everything back from different regions. Mm-hmm. But there are opportunities to really build back, if you like. God, is that a phrase that Labour used once? But to build back into what a new UK could look like in a textile industry, including the circularity side of things. And then rebrand itself and model what those opportunities are and explain to brands. I know some of the brands that were here today, the retailers, the high street, are now starting to understand. And I know that the government, there needs to be a bit of carrot with the stick around, you shouldn't be paying taxes to do this and that. Make it easy for us to rebuild our economy, And that's where investment can come, because money's not just going to appear. So it's got to be, well, if a brand, let's say if it's Shein, it's importing billions of pounds worth of gear into the UK with no taxes, and it's of a quality that's not really going to have a next life opportunity. Well, we don't let, as I say, we don't let cheap fags and booze come in. There needs to be something there that then can be reinvested into building something that's a little bit more closer to home, and then in harmony with what a broader sourcing strategy would look like.
Mm-hmm. Raj, from your perspective at Huntsman, when do you think that it makes sense to manufacture here in the UK versus abroad?
In all instances. And it's just hard because the one thing that we don't have in the UK anymore is a manufacturer for ready-to-wear suits in the UK. We can only produce bespoke suits in the UK. There used to be 3 factories pre-COVID, and the last one ended during COVID. So we were really unfortunate to lose that manufacturer who produced incredible ready-to-wear garments. We now have to go outside of that. So there's no kind of like sensible point for us to do it. But for me, everything, when you think about the locality, the ability to go to a production as opposed to deal with on the phone, you think now for us, we have to travel 4 times a year to a ready-to-wear manufacturer in Portugal to have conversations, whereas it would be really easy to get on a train to head up north and have that conversation there. Our hands are tied behind our back, but then there's a knock-on effect of that. Prior to this talk, I was speaking to some of the mill manufacturers, and when the last suit production for ready-to-wear left the UK, 10% of their fabric business also went as well. So they had to find 10% business internationally to bring back that revenue in. So for me, obviously it's always easy for me to turn around and say to bring manufacture back to the UK, but essentially it's borderline impossible sometimes. And it comes down to obviously having the talent, but it's also being able to hold that talent. And then also have the ability to do it.
Mm-hmm. And to come back to you, Simon, so we were talking, it's partial reshoring, right? Yeah. We're still including the global markets. But for instances where, let's say there's a brand in the audience who's realised through this discussion, hopefully, that there are elements that they'd like to move back to the UK, how do they transition away from those global markets, particularly if they've maybe been manufacturing in a country that's a little bit more economically vulnerable?
I suppose it's understanding what their customer is, what their timeframes are on when they need the product, how much they need of it, the scale, and planning. There is plenty of places to go and find out, things like Make It British, to understand what can be done where at the various different levels that we need, because we're talking about from a high street to a sort of a higher end. But it goes back to, again, understanding what fits with your business and how do you transition, if you like, to the understanding of improved net and profitability and reduced impact, and the cadence and the story and the relationships that can be built in to give it even more efficiency using new techs, so you don't need to have loads of samples. I always said to the buyers at ASOS that every sample that you make, whether it's a fit sample or a remake or a photo shoot, is costing you 25 times your FOB price. And they were like, we don't pay for samples. And I was like, it's understanding and where the inefficiencies are. And I know that in people like Jenny at Fashion Enter, for example, she's invested in Galaxius, which pays a piecework rate beyond minimum and living wage. And she also uses Style 3D, and then she's doing Cornic digital print. So she's got the whole new model. And it is, intake-wise, will be very different to the same intake, but also, you can do on demand, but you can also do to demand. And really, when you consider that still today, most retailers, when they're buying 1,000 of something, are doing that knowing that 40% will go straight to markdown. And therefore, that's getting bigger because they're getting less relevant, and then they're going further and cheaper. And it's a race to the bottom that's already begun. And actually, if they could just break that cycle, and really, it's a bit of a jump for a CFO to take, but it's how you start it and how you time up. God, that's me time to get up. I don't know. It's how you integrate it and feed it into your business and see where those balances work, because it isn't about, it would be for a business where they want to produce in the UK, but I think if you're talking more high street, then it's about seeding it and then working with it. And that's kind of what I was doing within the last company I was at. And I know now they're starting to see the benefits of it and working with partners and being able to have that relationship and planning and commitments. It doesn't all have to be just about volume and the economies of scale of volume. It can be through relationship and plannings and commitments. And for all the bad that Shein might be doing in terms of where and what, the model, they have very little waste. They only produce and then sell and move on. And yeah, consumption, again, different issue, but they're certainly not wasteful at the front end. And if we could kind of learn more on that and then apply that, immediately we fix potentially 40% of waste that our industry, or a lot of our industry, produces. So there's you know, these things are starting to sort of resonate now, and brands are starting to understand it, because it's a different way of generating profitability.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rachel, I'd also love to ask, you know, from a manufacturer's perspective, what do you think that governments could do to incentivize UK businesses to reshore?
Tax breaks would be nice. I think that would
It's not hard, is
help,
it?
no.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, even to go back to the skill part, like you said, about helping to fund, you know, even internship program that we want to do, placement program essentially, that we're looking to develop this year, which is a bit more of a open to all, fair for all internship. But with that, as an employer, just generally, we want to make sure that everyone's travel expenses are covered, like very basic stuff. There's lots of places that don't do that, which I don't think is very fair. So I think just some funding around even something as simple as that would help. But then let's take that a little bit bigger to say, well, actually, it would be really nice to be able to have a placement program that we can then send people to all of these amazing places that we have in the UK manufacturing. But it might mean someone from Birmingham coming to Maidenhead, where we are. It could be someone from London going to Elgin or going to Ayrshire. Can we team up with someone that's, you know, that can pay for the accommodation? It shouldn't have to come out of the employer's pocket all of the time. I'm quite happy to do it, really am. But is anyone going to pay more on our prices as well to facilitate that? That could be another route too, but it would be really good to see the government step in and help with some of these types of initiatives. On top of tax breaks, it'd be great as well.
Yeah. No, I think you've hit on a really interesting point, which is that, you know, right now when we think about the UK fashion industry generally, it feels very London-centric. But if we were to shift focus to look at that manufacturing side, it opens up a whole host of opportunities for people all up and down the country, which then, you know, would have intersections with class particularly. So it'd be a great opportunity to invest in that. I think that we're coming towards the end now. But as we kind of move on to the group discussions, there's three things that I'd love all of you guys to be thinking about. So firstly, what do we want to see from the government? So is it, you know, incentives like tax breaks? Is it more, you know, more funding for these opportunities? Legislation, for instance. Secondly, we want to think about what we want on the citizen side. So that's often, you know, to do with the training opportunities there, really incentivizing people to get into this kind of work. And lastly, what does best practice look like for businesses wanting to reshore? When should they be making that decision to move over to the UK? Is it to do with agility? Is it to do with sustainability, for instance? A number of different things in there. So yeah, looking forward to hearing all of your guys' thoughts. And thank you so much to our panelists. It's been really great having this insightful conversation with you. So thank you so much. And I'll hear from you guys all shortly.